prime thing is you have to win.
Ill intent, violence, physicality, pain. Enough is enough.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another emergency edition of the Just Win podcast. As you can see, we still need to change our intro. We also don't have Ted Nguyen with us. He's running a little bit late, but we're going to head and get it rolling since we see you guys are in here already. I'm Tashan Reed, that's Vic Tafur, and we're here because the Raiders, surprised a lot of people by firing GM Tom Telesco on Thursday. We had to do some work yesterday, so we couldn't quite get to you guys, but we're rolling today. So just want to jump into why they did it. So Vic, you want to kick it off?
Well, I think even you mentioned it was a surprise. I think even Tom was surprised. I think it's been, we've talked about the last week or so at the facility, a lot of eggshells, all over the floor. People weren't sure what was going on. I think Antonio Pierce, I was at the press conference on Monday, talked to his team as if he was coming back on Monday. And I think Tom was surprised that he was, fired. I think that tells you a little bit there that Tom wasn't really involved in the decision to fire Antonio Pierce. I think they looked at, when Mark Davis met with his advisors, they had dinner with Tom Brady on the night before they let go of Tom, and I think they decided, let's just make it a clean flush. Let's start fresh with, let's pair a GM and a head coach together, kind of like back with Ziegler and McDaniels. That didn't work out too well, but we'll try it again. And so I think it's it's just it shows you the impact of Tom Brady.
Yeah, we talked about Antonio Pierce. You could argue maybe he got a raw deal, but I think with Telesco, you probably make even a stronger argument, just given the first year that he had as GM. The draft class he put together was one of the Raiders' best in years. Today, the Associated Press voted Brock Bowers, first team All-Pro as a tight end as a rookie, which is pretty incredible. But Jackson Powers-Johnson was also a quality starter at guard and center. DJ Glaze ended up being a quality starter at right tackle. I know DeCamon Richardson wasn't very good, but he ended up starting games at cornerback. That's a hell of a draft class in your first year. And free agency, they didn't do as much. You had the big Gardner Minshew blemish, and Christian Wilkins got hurt. But just off of his work as a GM, Telesco didn't really do, I don't want to say enough. I guess enough to get fired after 1 year. He probably should have got another year, but it does make sense. You want to start, your head coach and GM on the same page, and don't want to necessarily have your head coach feel like they're forced to work with a GM that they aren't familiar with or maybe don't get along with. And, maybe this opens up some pathways for them to interview some different head coach candidates that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise. Today that they're scheduled to have 3 virtual interviews with Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson and Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn and Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo. And next week, they're supposed to interview former Jets head coach Robert Saleh and former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll, and they requested an interview with Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken, but I don't think that's scheduled yet. And we'll see who else they request. I know the big one that people have been surprised by is they haven't scheduled an interview with Mike Vrabel, but you can kind of look how things are going with New England, and it seems like he's probably headed for that Patriots job. But all that to say, whoever they hire at head coach, now they're freed up to make sure that they pair them with a GM that they would mesh with. Not to say that Telesco, he couldn't mesh with, one of the candidates they hired, but this kind of just opens up more pathways for them. And, we'll see what they land on. They haven't requested any GM candidates to this point. So it's kind of interesting that they've started to interview head coach candidates without having any sort of motion on the GM front. But we've seen teams do that before, and it still doesn't mean, just because they're interviewing head coaches first, they could still hire the GM first before they ultimately hire a head coach. So we'll see how this all shakes out in the long run.
Yeah, I think some may argue that, giving Gardner Minshew $15 million is kind of a fireable offense, but I don't think it was. But I could see the argument where, the mandate was get a quarterback. We brought this guy in, his experience, that's supposed to be his thing. And, it was unable to get to the top 3. It wasn't possible. And some fans still think, hey, we could have got Jaden Daniels and Telesco blew it. That was never a possibility. The top 3 teams were not trading down, and you see why. They got their guys. And I think that was, at first, I kind of felt like it might be okay for Tom as far as getting fired, because I think if he'd stayed on, it was kind of a no-win deal. I think if they had success, it would have been all Tom Brady and all his influence. And if they had not had success, they had lost, it'd be blamed on Tom, and he'd be the scapegoat. So I think in that respect, I can see where it's not the worst thing. But on the other hand, when you get fired, 2 years in a row as a general manager, both for the Chargers, then you come back because Mark Davis says, "Hey, we really want your experience. I know you want to take a year off, but we really want you." And you throw more money at him, and he comes back, and you get fired again. I can't see getting fired 2 years in a row as a GM and getting a third chance. So in that aspect, it kind of sucks because I think he probably deserved a little better fate than that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in terms of being a GM, it's probably a wrap for him. But I mean, he's been doing this for in terms of being an executive overall for about 30 plus years. So if he wanted to walk away, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Now he's got some extra money to to hang out in Southern California with. But in terms of candidates who they could consider for the GM position, I wrote a story yesterday breaking down 10 potential names. Buccaneers assistant GM John Spytek, Giants executive advisor to the GM Ryan Coden, Vikings senior vice president of player personnel Ryan Grigson, Bills director of player personnel Terrence Gray, Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham, 49ers director of scouting and football operations Josh Williams, Chiefs assistant GM Mike Borgonzi, Raiders assistant GM Champ Kelly, Bengals senior personnel executive Trey Brown, and Commanders assistant GM Lance Newmark. So threw some names out there. There's obviously other ones that they could potentially interview. But a few of those, they kind of have ties to either Tom Brady or potential head coaching candidates. I think Spytek kind of jumps out to me as a pretty quality option. He was in the Bucs front office where when Tom Brady, left the Patriots to sign with the Bucs, he was one of the guys that was involved in that decision. He also was a college teammate of Brady's at Michigan for a year back in the day, and he's been a pretty good GM. I mean, even after Brady left, obviously they won a Super Bowl, but he was part of the group that brought in Baker Mayfield and put together the unit that's made the playoffs back-to-back years with Mayfield at quarterback, which I don't think many people saw coming. And so I think of the outside names, he's probably the strongest overall, but there's still some other quality candidates out there.
Yeah, a couple of those guys have come in through the doors before, like Spytek, I think Trey Brown, and so there's some familiarity there. And I think it's tricky because we're trying to guess what they might do, and it's all indications are that Tom Brady's kind of like definitely a heavy influencer in all this, and he's not really available. He's kind of walled himself off pretty good. I think they've also done a tricky thing. We talk about this more when we talk about the coaches, but I think they've kind of, and I could be wrong, we'll see what happens, but it seems like they're trying to do a thing where Brady's involved, but not like overtly involved, so they can come out and say, "Hey, it was all Mark Davis." Obviously, Tom gave me some ideas, but this is my moves. And that allows Tom to keep doing the broadcasting thing. So, if that's the case, it's kind of a weird deal. But I can see that being the case where, we've both tried to get a hold of Mark Davis, and usually he replies to us after a couple of days, but it's been longer this week. And my guess is because we're doing dinners with these guys coming in, all the candidates. I'm sure he's busy at night and busy during the day. Today he has the 2 interviews. But at some point, I'd like to hear how this works exactly with Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like a more buttoned up process than it's been in years past. Like you said, Mark Davis has usually talked at some point. He usually doesn't do a press conference, but hops on the phone with a few beat writers locally, maybe some national guys, and explains himself. But last year in particular was kind of a search that was all over the place between they were going to hire the GM first, and then they hired AP first, and then they were going to hire Champ Kelly and then didn't, and then brought in Tom Telesco. So it was, it's kind of a mess. And they've had a few searches now that have been a mess, and it seems like they're trying to avoid that. And part of the way they're trying to avoid that is by keeping it more buttoned up than it's been in years past. And something else that they're doing that's different is they hired Jed Hughes of Korn Ferry search firm to reach out to prospective candidates for them for both their GM and head coach openings. I can't remember, at least not since I've been on the beat. I don't think the Raiders have used a search firm for one of their searches, but maybe they have in years past. But he's also pretty buttoned up. He's not a guy that talks a whole bunch. He's been in this business for a long time, experienced guy. So between him getting involved, Brady being involved, and Mark Davis not talking as much, definitely seems like they're changing their approach this time around. If that's going to make them land on any better candidates than they have in the years past, we'll see. Like, there's no guarantee, but at least they're doing something different for all the people calling for Mark Davis to sell the team.
Yeah, I mean the approach we've talked about has not been good in the past. They've had a lot of failures, a lot of botched searches. So I think if you can bring in some help, good. But yeah, well, I mean we'll see. I think it is a bad luck to have Antonio talk to the media and his players and get fired, and the GM get fired, and there's nothing. Like there was like a 2-line statement from the team both times, and no comment from the owner, and I think it's a bad look. But again, people are kind of used to it. I think it's kind of sad, but I think that's kind of what the Raiders have become, kind of like this weird, uh, you know, weird franchise that does weird shit. So I think, and if they are turning the page, it'll be a different look with Tom Brady involved. We'll see. But I think it could be more of a murky kind of like, yeah, he's involved, but not really involved. And I think it could be a lot of weird shit going on for a while.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't really think like either way. Like we know he has influence, so whether he comes out and says it or not, like we can read the obvious tea leaves. I mean, he was in Las Vegas this past week, meeting with Mark Davis leading up to these decisions, and they had another meeting together with Brady, Davis, and some others on Wednesday. That's kind of when the tides turned on Telesco, because initially I think they planned on keeping him, but the longer they met and talked about it, they ended up deciding that they need to go in another direction, and so. And I think it's not unusual for things to work that way with an advisor, even if they aren't making the quote unquote final decision, like they have a strong influence and it could change the owner's mind one way or the other. And so they're not the only team in the league with that type of setup. I think it just kind of stands out a little bit more since, the name is Tom Brady and he is who he is. But back to the GM candidates, some others that kind of stand out. I think Coden, if they did have a shot at Vrabel, which it seems like they don't, he'd probably be the GM choice. Like he was with the Titans back when Vrabel was there. And in a story where our Zach Rosenblatt at The Athletic, he said that that's who he wanted to get the GM job before they went elsewhere with Rand Carthon. So, at this point, it seems like Vrabel probably is an option. So maybe that is on the table. But Grigson is another one that's linked to a head coach. He's the Vikings with defense coordinator Brian Flores. The Raiders haven't put in a slip for him yet, but maybe he's somebody that emerges at some point. And then Newmark, he's with the Commanders now as their assistant GM, but he was with the Lions for I think 26 years. And so he has relationships with both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So if they did, which I'm sure most fans want them to get Ben Johnson, he's probably the crown jewel at this point. But even if they went with Aaron Glenn, he's somebody that has familiarity. So he can make sense if they want to, if the priority is what they're saying it is in terms of making sure that the GM and the head coach are aligned. Those are a few pairings that could work.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fascinating process. I think I wanted to hire the coach first, then the GM, or vice versa. But we talked a little bit on this last emergency podcast about Pete Carroll, and I was kind of down on Pete Carroll. I said he was, it's too old, and if you are doing the whole rebuild and start over, I'm not sure that makes sense to me. But the more I thought about it, I could definitely see where it makes sense. I think he comes in next week for an interview, but. We're talking about like if Tom Brady does not really emerge as a guy at the forefront, if he stays in the shadows, and Mark Davis can't really be the face of this thing. He doesn't want to be the face of this thing. So I think you need someone who has some personality, some charisma, who can talk to the media, kind of get out in front of things and talk to players and kind of give fans some hope. And I think that would be Pete Carroll. I think he's a perfect guy for that, based on his experience, based on his personality, based on everything. And I think in that case, if he is brought in to be the face of this thing, then you need like a plan. You need like a succession plan because he is 73. So you need somebody to bring in as a coordinator who's kind of next in line. And I guess that could work. I don't think it's the best plan, but now I see where it makes sense as opposed to the other day where I was like, oh, hell no, Pete Carroll. But now I'm like, all right, if that's what we're doing, I can see Pete Carroll.
Yeah, and I mean, I reached out to someone I know in the Seahawks front office. I worked with Pete Carroll for a few years and said all that leadership stuff is real. And, I mean, everybody from the players to the coaches to executives, kind of want to run through a wall for him. And so a lot of those qualities that really were some of the main reasons why Pierce got hired, he could also bring to the table. But he's a much more experienced head coach, both at the college and professional level, and had a ton of success. Like he is old. I think he'll be 73 or 74 at the start of next season.
He's 73. I looked it up. He's 73. He'll be 74 in September. So I think he'd be the oldest coach in the history of the league. I think Roman Crennel, was 73 years, 100 days. So I think it's close, but I think people beat him out as the oldest coach ever in the league.
Yeah, but he's a young 73, man. He's still running around, taking off his shirt. Got a lot of energy.
He kicked Ted's ass for sure. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it'd be a fine hire, and he's well connected. So you would think he'd be able to put together a quality assistant coaching staff underneath him as well. So I really have no issues with it. I think I know everybody's behind the Ben Johnson hire and everything. I'm still a little bit skeptical if he would actually, even though they got him the interview today. Oh, there goes Ted. You showed up, man.
I blame Neil. The last thing I read on the text message was 3 p.m., but Neil's Eastern.
There was like 10 messages after that said, yo, we're doing noon. Noon? Yeah, good.
You cannot come in and blame Neil, man. That poor guy gets no respect hesitation. Yeah. Come in firing shots.
You better do some reading, man.
Come on, man. Poor Neil.
We were just talking about the candidates that they're was wrapped up talking about Carroll and getting into the coordinators that they're interviewing today. I'm still a little bit skeptical if Ben Johnson would actually come here. I think even if the Patriots job is off the board for him, I think the Bears job would probably be more appealing because of the quarterback situation. You could probably say even the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence. But they got him at least doing a virtual interview. The thing to keep in mind with these guys that they're interviewing that are still on playoff teams is they can't technically hire these guys until the team is eliminated from the playoffs, according to NFL rules. Like we see teams break that all the time. They have agreements in principle, and then it's announced suddenly the day after the team gets eliminated and whatnot. So I'm not saying that they can't essentially come to an agreement, but there is a little bit of a waiting game. Like they can't interview them in person, like according to rules, until after the divisional round at the earliest. And so you rarely see it. I don't know if there's ever been a team that's hired a head coach without at least having one in-person interview. So it's not. I don't see a situation where like the Raiders agree to hire Ben Johnson before they even meet him in person. Just for people that have been asking about that. So, but when it comes to the coaches that aren't currently employed as head coaches, whether it's or coordinators, Pete Carroll, they could bring him in person, which is the plan to do that next week. And then Saleh as well, since he's currently unemployed. They're scheduled to bring him in next Thursday, I believe, for an in-person interview. So, some of these are virtual, some of them are in person, but wouldn't expect a decision at head coach, at least for a couple more weeks.
Yeah, as far as Johnson, let's say, obviously he's the the cream of the crop, I guess, the belle of the dance. But I think we'll find out shortly what he really thinks about guys like Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence. Because if he's high on those guys and their ceiling, those will seem like natural places to go because they want him to give him the power and he has a quarterback in place. If not, then I think the Raiders have a shot because you say, look, what we'll do this in your image, whatever you want to do. We'll carve out we'll make this look the way you want it to look, and we'll figure out a quarterback plan, and he'll know that he's the guy long term. At some point, he'll get his guy. There's not a rush to get him this year. You want to get him this year, but if you don't, he knows that he's there until they get one. So I think that'd be a selling point with Johnson.
Yeah, I think with Johnson, obviously the Raiders fired Tom Telesco, and the Jaguars also have a GM opening. So those are the two jobs where he can bring in his own guy as GM if he wants. So if that's a big deal to him, then that pretty much just excludes the Raiders and Jaguars. Am I correct?
You mean includes?
Includes, yeah, Raiders and Jaguars.
The Jets also have.
Okay, yeah. So the Jets are possible, but the Jets are. Yeah, I don't know if he wants.
I'll make sure I heard you right. So the Jags did not fire the GM. The Jags kept their GM.
Yeah,
yeah. So it'd be the Jets and Raiders then.
Well, then again, I mean, if you really want Johnson, he comes and hey, man, I don't like Trent Baalke, get him out of here. Then he said, Trent, get the fuck out of here. So I don't think that's a done deal for sure. I think that Trent's there just in case.
Yeah, I don't think it's like something that gives the Raiders a leg up necessarily. I think it's just something that keeps it from being a negative if they were to keep Telesco and Ben Johnson didn't want to work with him for whatever reason. I think it's interesting that it seems like they're pretty varied in terms of the types of head coaching candidates that they're looking at. I mean, we have 3 defensive play callers, 2 offensive play callers, and Pete Carroll doesn't call plays on either side of the ball. So it doesn't seem like they're only going for the offensive-minded guy or, things of that nature. And probably the most surprising name that they haven't at least requested an interview yet, outside of Vrabel. But I don't think Vrabel's really surprising just because it seems to be obvious that he's going to the Patriots. I'll say the next surprising one is probably Bucs offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. They haven't requested an interview with him. And it's kind of, at this point, like if you haven't, like, are you going to do it? They could still do it next week, of course, especially if the Bucs get eliminated this weekend. They could just bring him in person. But I think it's been a little bit surprising because he's probably the second hottest offensive play caller name behind Ben Johnson.
It's all fluid, but I heard he's not on the list, so I think he's not really in consideration. I'm not sure why, but and I also heard that we were all talking about Brian Flores a lot, and I think we both said that it might be a tough sell for Mark Davis as far as all the player stuff because he's got some. I mean, Tua really said he was terrible, and recently Ryan Fitzpatrick said there was not one player in his second year with the Dolphins or coach. He said not one player or coach on that Dolphins second-year team under Flores that would vouch for him. So that was, I mean. If you're Mark Davis, that definitely has to cause you, to open your eyes a little bit. So I don't think I'm not sure if Flores would happen either. So those 3 guys would be the surprising ones for me. They're not on the list.
I can see that too because they kind of bought the whole Josh McDaniels, he's turned a new leaf type of deal when they hired him because nobody liked him too. in his previous stops, and all of a sudden he had this new story where he's going to be a new guy and a personal guy, and I think they might not want to buy that same story with Brian Flores, especially with how disastrous those relationships were in Miami. But just real quick, back to the Ben Johnson thing. Like, do we think quarterback is a huge deal to him because with his offense and his system, and Jared Goff is not the most physically talented guy, so maybe he thinks the structure of the offense is more important, and getting that backbone together is more important before committing to a quarterback. So trying to fix the offensive line, tight end, running back before getting to the quarterback. Maybe he values those things.
I mean, I think like if you have two offers on the table and one of them has a quarterback and the other one doesn't, like it's probably still going to be a tiebreaker for him. So I don't think that it's like just completely irrelevant. I'm sure it's not the only thing he cares about, whether it's ownership or being aligned with the GM or the rest of the roster. Of course, I'm sure he factors in all those things, but I'm not sure it's going to be to the point where it's like, oh yeah, they have a nice young up and coming quarterback and that doesn't matter to me. Like it's kind of hard pressed to see that being his approach. Plus, you can still do the same thing. Like if you have a rookie guy on a rookie scale contract, like a Caleb Williams, for example, like you can pour most of your resources into the rest of the roster and building that up, even though you are already committed to the guy. So, if anything, it seems like the Raiders' pathways in particular, we've talked about it, like the draft, like it probably isn't super realistic for them to get their starter for this upcoming season through the draft. So it's probably going to be a veteran guy that you have to make at least a little bit of an investment in. Like if let's say they trade for Geno Smith or something like that, or sign Sam Darnold or something of that nature. Like if they're going to get like a clear upgrade at quarterback this offseason, it's probably going to have to be like a significant financial investment. So I don't know if that really would like factor into like the logic for Johnson if he were to decide to come here.
Plus, man, Jared Goff was like a top pick, man. Jared Goff's got a pretty good skill set. I mean, he's not like he's not chopped liver.
No, he's not. But it's not like he's not one of these Raider type of quarterbacks that's going to get outside the pocket and do those things. And he was a little bit of chopped liver at the end of the Rams, at his end of his Rams tenure. They had to essentially trade. The Rams had to essentially give them a first round pick to take on that contract.
But they really want Stafford though, so I don't know. I'm not going to down the hill for Jared Goff, but he's pretty good. I mean, I think he's definitely showed this year again. I mean, but again, I think we don't really know Ben Johnson. We don't really know what he's thinking. I mean, that's kind of the mystery of this whole thing. So we'll see. We'll see how important the quarterback is, or how important power is. Does he want to be calling the shots? Does he want to build a roster with the GM? Does he want a lot of money? I mean, he has a great thing in his up his sleeve where he can stay put. I mean, he's in a great spot right now. He's super young. He's on a really dynamic kind of like really impressive team where they might win this year. They might win for a while. So I think he can always sit back and wait, and then like we talked about, wait for Zach Taylor to fall down and go get with Joe Burrow.
Yeah, but I mean, I think he went out and said he's not going to take an interview just to take an interview. So this is like, I think some more skeptical fans are like, oh, he's just taking an interview to be nice and professional, or he's taking an interview to help his negotiations or whatever. But I don't think that's the case. I think, which is why I was pretty surprised that he took the Raiders interview, with the dysfunction and all the choices he has. I think he's really considering this because he said that's going to be the case. So, I mean, if you're the Raiders, the best sales pitch you could make is you could bring in your own GM. We have some young pieces on offensive line. Brock Bowers fits what you want to do, and we have the cap space to build this thing out the way you want it. We have a minority owner who's, I think it's pretty clear now that he's not just a minority owner. He has some power with football acumen, and there's, I guess, no tax in Vegas. I don't know what what would be the best sales pitch the Raiders could. What would be the best pitch the Raiders could make Ben Johnson?
I mean, it's the fact that they do have a lot of resources financially now with Las Vegas, the way it's changed their business. They aren't hamstrung like they were in years past back in Oakland, where they couldn't give out big signing bonuses or pay their head coaches a bunch of money and things of that nature. Like that's pretty much a thing of the past now. And their cap situation is pretty clean. Like even on the worst estimates, they have nearly $100 million in cap space. They do have some talent on the roster, and Max Crosby and Brock Bowers, and it's a chance for you to really reconstruct the franchise and your image. Along with helping choose who the GM is, helping choose the direction of the roster, helping pick the next quarterback. Like it's kind of your playground in terms of how you want to build it. It doesn't matter if you have faith in the ownership group, and maybe if it was just Mark Davis, maybe you don't, but perhaps Tom Brady changed that math for him, and so. They really can't guarantee him anything. Like they just aren't in a position to do that. I think the biggest pitch to him is just the fact that it's so much that's unsettled. You can kind of change whatever you want to in a way.
Yeah, we don't know for sure what happened, but I think we all have to assume that Tom Brady got on the phone with him and said, "Hey, man, this could be a great job for you." I'm not sure if Mark Davis can pull a Johnson interview by himself, so I think this is probably due to Tom Brady.
Yeah, and maybe he doesn't want to be tied to Trevor Lawrence. Maybe he doesn't want to.
For sure.
Maybe he doesn't want to commit to developing Caleb Williams, who might not be a great fit in what he wants to do. So there are those possibilities. And I mean, if you really kind of squint, you can kind of see like the vision of Ben Johnson's offense with what the Raiders have. I mean, basically Brock Bowers would play the Amon St. Brown role. There's Jackson Powers Johnson, who I said I think he could be a star run blocker. Max Crosby is better than Hutchinson. I mean, there's some of the pieces you can see that he might like, but like you said, it's more of just like you have this clean slate and you have the ability to do what you wanted and shape this roster how you want to. So, I mean, I think. Obviously, that's the dream. I still think it's a bit of a long shot, but I mean, I think it's definitely a positive sign he took the interview.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we talked about Flores earlier and him kind of having a bad reputation from his last head coaching stint. I mean, I think you can kind of say the same thing about Spags. Like, as somebody that was a St. Louis Rams fan at the time, like I do not remember his tenure as head coach fondly. He was kind of in that control freak kind of mode of head coach that was, didn't know how to delegate and wasn't the most loved by the players either. So I think since they requested an interview with him, it does kind of seem a little weird that they wouldn't request an interview with Flores. But, I guess we'll see how it plays out. Again, it's still early in the process, so everybody's not on the table.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, outside of that, that's pretty much all this news. So we could jump into questions.
All right, let's see. First question from Trip. Pete Carroll has a good record with quarterbacks. Also, do you think Mark Davis has a good or bad reputation as a boss? I think Mark Davis has a pretty good reputation. He pays his guys a lot of money even when they're not working. So, that's that's a positive. I mean, I feel like Mark Davis is probably a good boss. I mean, those after game meetings probably aren't too, maybe a little awkward, but other than that, I feel like he's pretty hands off. Am I wrong there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of like the outside perception that like Davis is a bad owner is more about him like making bad like hires. Like when it comes to like how it is working for the Raiders, like I think most people, can't speak for every single person, but the players tend to like him just because he cares a lot about what the players thinks and interacts with them a lot. He has the whole, once a Raider, always a Raider thing that is real. I mean, they do treat their alumni probably as well as any franchise in the league. I know Vic had a story written about that last year about, all the stuff that they've done for some of the older players having health issues and whatnot. He is pretty hands-off after you're hired in terms of what you get to do as a head coach and GM. So I think like once you're in the building, like you probably are going to like Mark Davis. I think the criticism is more so about like he doesn't seem to know what he's doing when it comes to like hiring people, which is still a valid critique, but it doesn't mean he's like this like terrible boss that people hate working for. Because even like in the NFLPA player, reviews or whatever they do every year, the Raiders are always up there in terms of how their families are treated in facilities and yada 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 yada, all that good stuff. But on the first part, I think Pete Carroll, we kind of talked about it, but yeah, I think it'd be a sound hire. It's just a matter of like what your timeline is. If you hire somebody that old, like, do you think this roster is close and you're going to be going for it this year or next year, or is Pete Carroll cool with more of a rebuild type of situation?
I think Pete obviously wants back in, so I think he's probably spent the last year kind of, I'm sure, figuring out what he wants to do this different this time as far as the roster and his staff. And I think he probably has to come in with a plan. I'm sure it'll be really organized and detailed. Hey, I want to do this, this, and this, and this. So, and have the experience behind it, and obviously with the quarterbacks as well. So that'd be a positive. I think, as far as Mark Davis, I think he is great with alumni players. He definitely really wants to win, but they have 2 winning seasons in 13, and this is going to be a seventh head coach. So I would say he is a bad boss.
And as far as Pete Carroll and his record with quarterbacks, from what I remember, it's pretty much only Russell Wilson and Geno Smith in his time in NFL.
This back in the day, I think he had Drew Bledsoe back in the day when he was first a head coach with the Patriots. I think was Drew Bledsoe there, and then obviously in college he had a ton of great quarterbacks as well that he helped develop and turned into Heisman Trophy winners and whatnot. So, I would say he has a pretty good record with quarterbacks.
And he was absolutely right about Russell Wilson. I mean, I was one of the guys that was pushing, let Russ cook, blah, blah, blah. But he definitely needs to be in a structured offense with the running game. And that proved to be right. So maybe he does have a good record with quarterbacks.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Next question by Sam DeMann. What do you think about Monken head coach, Milroe quarterback? I am all out on Jalen Milroe. Man, he looked terrible against Michigan. He just did not look prepared. And as we've seen in this league, it is not a developmental league. This is not a league where you could take a quarterback that needs a huge developmental gap, especially in the first round, and give him time to do it. There's just no patience in this league and no time, and people get fired. So maybe if you get him in the mid rounds and you could let him sit for a few years, possibly. But yeah, he's just that's a big thing to ask for a guy to develop that quickly if you're going to take him early on. As far as Monken, I really like what he did with Baltimore, evolving that offense in the first year, second year, taking another evolution and changing the offense again. But he is a bit of an older coach. I mean, if he was younger,
he's about 20 years younger than Pete Carroll. Shit.
Oh yeah, for sure. But if he was like a guy in his 30s or 40s, he'd probably be the hottest candidate in the league. So I mean, I like Monken. I wouldn't put him in the class as Johnson as far as his viability, but or just attractiveness as a prospect. But
yeah. I mean, I think what he's done with the Ravens offense the last couple of years, like it looks like Lamar, he's the first team All-Pro again this year. He's probably going to win MVP for the third time. Obviously, he was already a great player, but Monken, I think, has unlocked their passing offense in a way that it wasn't there before. He was Georgia offense coordinator with Brock Bowers when he was there, so clearly there's a familiarity there, and he'd know how to maximize his skill set. He hasn't been a head coach at the pros before, but he was a head coach at the college level, and he did take that program from being one of the worst out to making a bowl game in his final year before he moved on to the NFL. And so he's only 58 years old, so I think that's still, fine for a head coach. Like, being around that age, like some of the other candidates they're interviewing are also around that age. So I think he'd be a pretty good hire. I don't think they have an interview scheduled with him just yet, but we'll see what happens with the Ravens this weekend, see if he may be available to talk in person next week.
Yeah, to me, he's kind of the wild card here. I think you'd have to really nail his interview because I think the other guys have probably a little bit of a stronger case. And I think a lot would depend on what his plans are at quarterback. You'd have to have a real, concrete, this is my guy, I can do this with him, or I would go get him and develop him. And like you said, Milroe is kind of a ways off. So I'm not sure. You might like Milroe, but that's not a plan for next year. That's a plan for down the road. So I think you would need an immediate plan as far as how his offense gets better tomorrow with him as coach. So, but yeah, for me, it's all about the interview with him. He has to do really well because I think he is kind of the down the list on this list.
Yeah, and as far as Monken, he doesn't need a mobile quarterback in his offense. He's historically an air raid guy, so it was a bit different for him to actually coach Lamar and make some adjustments to his offense, but it's not a requirement for him to get an athletic quarterback. All right, next question from Dick Everly. Appreciate the extra shoes. My cue shows. My question: we always predict. We always predict, but who do you think, as a fan, want for general manager or coach, and why?
I mean, I don't know if fans really know GMs that well. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm underestimating you guys, but I think whoever Ben Johnson wants probably is the pick for GM for most fans. You would think that he's the top candidate in a lot of fans' minds, behind Vrabel, or maybe even over Vrabel for some fans if they don't want to go to Patriot way again. So, mentioned earlier, the Commanders' assistant GM, he worked with the Lions in the past, so maybe that could be a fit. Lance Newmark is his name, or maybe there's somebody in the Lions front office currently that he would want to bring with him. But you would think that would be the pairing that fans want the most.
Yeah, I saw someone here had a comment, Reggie McKenzie 2.0. So I'm on board, man. Bring back Reggie.
He's a favorite to be the Titans GM right now.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm a big Reggie guy, but I think the fans just want some excitement, and they want to win. Clearly, I mean, I think they all, were all aboard with the Antonio Pierce project, and it kind of jumped off the boat pretty quickly. So I think they just want to win and have some excitement. So I think as long as there's a plan in place and there's some hope, I think Raider fans will be fine. I think. I don't know if there's a GM that really tickles their fancy, but I think the coach thing will be the key for fans.
Yeah, I think if they do Ben Johnson is by far the top on the list, and whoever, and if you just plug him in and whoever he wants a GM would work. But I think if you do get a GM first or get another GM, I think Alec Halaby is a interesting name from the Eagles, just because if you want to push your franchise to be a little bit more forward thinking into analytics and building in the trenches and all those things they do really well in Philadelphia, I think he would bring that. So yeah. All right. Next question from David: would you trade Brock for any of Penix, Nix, or JJ? And he means JJ McCarthy.
I'm guessing he means like if you could go back and draft history or something like that, probably.
Yeah, but I think based on what we know now, like, would we change that draft pick?
That's a great question. The quick answer is no, because Brock set a record for most catches by anyone, so like 10 records. But I don't know, man, because even you look at the way the NFL works with the salary caps and stuff, and then if you can get a young quarterback who's really good, that definitely is worth more than a star tight end, I have to say. So I probably would, and I hate to say it, but I probably would.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Bo Nix is definitely better than I thought he would be, but I still don't know if he's ever going to be like a star quarterback. I think he's more in like the solid kind of Derek Carr-ish kind of range of quarterback. And I don't think we've seen enough out of Penix and JJ. JJ, of course, not because he didn't play, but even Penix, like, he didn't play that much at the end of the road there with the Falcons. I'd probably stick with Brock personally. He's all-pro player already. I think you could argue he's the best tight. I mean, this year he was the best tight end in the league. And I think there's a big gap, even at a different position. Tight end is nowhere near as valuable as quarterback, but there's still a huge gap between being the best at your position and maybe being like league average as a quarterback. I think they could keep, have Brock and have a quarterback who is around that range, like I said, like a Geno Smith or something, and he'll look a lot better because he's with Brock. So I think I'd probably stick with Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I think as far as Bo Nix, I think environment matters for every quarterback, but I think with Bo Nix, he's just in a very good situation with a coach, Sean Payton, that really believes in him and knows how to bring out his skill set. And I agree with you. I think he's kind of in that Derek Carr range. I don't know if he'll ever be an elite quarterback, but I mean, that's good enough to win if you have the right guys around him. If Bo Nix was drafted to the Raiders, he would not be having the rookie season that he's having now. And as far as Penix, we haven't seen enough of him just yet. But what we've seen, very promising. And we haven't seen JJ McCarthy at all this season. And with Brock Bowers, we know that he is an elite tight end, and he's going to be at the top of his position for many years to come. So it's basically a gamble. Are you going to gamble for a guy that you think could be a top quarterback, which would be a lot more valuable than a top tight end, or do you just want a guy that's top of his position already, and you know that that's what you're going to get? So I think right now of those guys, I would stick with Bowers. I mean, if you're talking about Jaden blanking on his name right now, Washington quarterback.
Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, if you're talking about Jaden Daniels or Drake May,
But not
I
though.
think I would
That's not the question.
Yeah, well, they couldn't have gotten those guys.
I think I would take Bowers right now.
I think part of the gamble is and the reason I said yes, and that's a tough call. I probably wouldn't say yes with JJ, but the other two I definitely would. I think because now you know not only the options last year, how besides after those first 6, it was all crap, and this year the draft class is not very impressive. So I think now you know in hindsight those guys probably even more valuable. Those 3 guys. So I think that's why I would lean towards saying yes.
Yeah, well. Trade for JJ. That's my stance. Or
the
still trade for
JJ. Are keeping him, man. We gotta let them cook, man. They got their setup. My trade Daniel Jones might be able to get him.
Not looking too hot. Ramon asks, if they miss out on drafting quarterbacks, do you think Ben Johnson would work with already assuming that Ben Johnson is going to be the Raiders coach? Do you think Ben Johnson would work with a reclamation project, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and try finding Sam Darnold type lightning in a bottle?
You forgot my guy Jake Browning. Where's Jake Browning on that list, man? Sorry,
forget Jake Browning, man. You've been pushing the Jake Browning train.
He's also
the hardest of any person in the history of the world.
Is he already locked in on the Bengals?
The last 5 days I have been. So good.
You have to. I mean, given where they are at quarterback, you have to at least consider those reclamation projects, right? Like they can't be too good for anybody at this point. Not saying that they sign them, but at least look into it. I think Zach Wilson. He has those physical traits. Like, does he have anything else that makes you a good quarterback? He hasn't shown it so far, but maybe they think could have said the same thing about Sam Darnold before this year, and so maybe he thinks there's something in there could be untapped. Or Justin Fields, I think he's shown more flash. I would say pretty confidently he's shown more flashes than Zach Wilson when it comes to having some promise as a quarterback, and figure he would be available as well. So kind of those young guys that will probably be looking for like a 1-year deal. It's kind of like why not? Like if you can't get a Sam Darnold, which we probably don't think he's going to be available, or if you can't trade for Kyler Murray or Geno Smith, that's kind of the range of quarterback. Or I don't think he wants to come here, but like Aaron Rodgers is probably the only other big name guy. Derek Carr. That's you pretty quickly get into that range of reclamation projects, and so you could sign one on a 1-year deal, and if he ends up not panning out, it's really not that big of a deal, and you could still keep your options open in the draft. So it would be a little surprising if they came out of March without adding some sort of veteran quarterback to the mix.
Yeah, I think the number one thing with those reclamation projects are good environment and very good play callers. So, I mean, if you get Ben Johnson, I could definitely see them trying out one of those projects, especially because it doesn't look like they're going to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. Justin Fields, I don't think if Ben Johnson's coach, I don't think Justin Fields would be a big target because he just doesn't fit in that timing type of offense. Zach Wilson, he not really a timing quarterback, but he does have a quick release, and I think people kind of thought that he might be able to turn into that, but he just hasn't. So, but he's worked with Sean Payton this whole year, and who knows what kind of improvements he made behind the scenes. So that's a possibility.
So if you're Sean Payton, are you going to trade Zach Wilson to the Raiders?
He's a free agent after this year.
Yes, on my bet.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Jake Browning works, in this scenario.
Let's go.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Oh, Cody donates $10 and did not ask a question.
No, they had a question.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Cody, you got one. Yeah.
Hey, fellas, very early, but any higher profile free agent targets for this upcoming offseason. I like Trey Smith, guard from Kansas City, a lot. He's going to be very expensive. And Reed, the corner from the Jets. I think he's a very good corner, and he'd be a great addition to any quarterback room.
Yeah, I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I think T. Higgins is a big one that jumps out. That receiver, they already have Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, so they have some solid options. But I think a true number one receiver could really take that group over the top and set up whoever the next quarterback is to be in a pretty good situation.
I got nothing. We have no GM, no coach. I can't possibly play this game. I apologize. Take custodian money back, Cody. I apologize. That was terrible on my part.
Jake Browning is his
Jake Browning. He said Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson's a free agent. Zach Wilson.
There you go.
I'm back in. Zach Wilson.
All right. Steve asks, why would Mark allow a coach to bring their own GM if he's seen it not work with Ziegler and Mayock? Because they're different people. So you're banking on the fact that they're different people making it work. But I do agree that generally the structure of a head coach having a ton of power, especially personnel power, typically has not worked out. But I mean, Ben Johnson's such a big fish that he kind of wields that type of power.
My short answer is going to be because Tom Brady said so. Okay, next.
Also, just because one parent doesn't work out, it's kind of the same thing like last year when Mark was saying he didn't want to hire a first-time head coach, first-time GM. It's like, okay, didn't work once doesn't mean that any first-time GM head coach combo can never work out for the history of the NFL moving forward. So it's just not really the sound process to do that. Another quarterback name somebody mentioned was could Ben Johnson bring Hendon Hooker with him? I guess maybe. I don't know. I don't know how attractive he is. I haven't seen anything from him really, but maybe. He's been around him every day.
I like it.
They could bring in Teddy Bridgewater.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think that one's as sexy.
No. All right. Who are your guesses as next head coach GM?
Put Vic on the spot, man. He's not giving any answers today. Gotta make him answer something.
Yeah, Vic, who do you think's the next head coach
I've given
GM?
some great answers. I'm going to say Deion Sanders and...
a serious answer.
A serious answer? All right, serious answer. I mean, I guess I've talked myself into the whole Pete Carroll thing, so I guess I'll say Pete Carroll, and I'm not sure which one of our gym candidates kind of pairs. I'm sure he has his own guy in mind, but or Tom Delay Spytek, maybe because of the Brady connection. So I'll say Pete Carroll and Spytek.
You got anybody, Ted, that you're itching for? Ben Johnson?
I'm gonna live on the dream. I'm gonna say Ben Johnson and the guy from the Jaguars that he wants.
I mean the Commanders.
Or Commanders, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with I think a head coach. I'm gonna go with the sleeper, man. I'm gonna go with Todd Monken. I think they give him a shot to be a head coach in NFL and Spytek. I think he's next to the Chiefs assistant GM, I think he's probably Chiefs assistant GM. I mean, he's been with them throughout all the Super Bowls and all the playoff runs the last few years. So that could be a good one to. Yeah, I'll flip it to mix it up. Bergonzi from the Chiefs, weaken your divisional opponent a little bit. Get a guy that has three Super Bowls under his belt, has no Patriots ties, no Brady ties, so the fans won't say that Brady's running the show. So I'll go with those two.
Do you think coaching experience matters in this round? Like, even if they had a bad experience, like it seems like those are the guys that they're seriously considering. And yes, with them not even considering Liam Cohen, or maybe Liam Cohen rejected the interview requests.
No, I don't think he did. Good.
I think experience broadly, like whether you were a head coach or not, I think being experienced is something that Mark Davis in his gut would probably lean towards after the Antonio Pierce experience, just given it's typically how he goes. Like if he takes a shot on a young up and coming guy who's unproven, then he goes to an experienced guy and vice versa. So coming off of Pierce, you would think that he would go towards somebody who has more skins under his belt a little bit. So, I don't think you necessarily have had to have been a head coach before, but like somebody like Monken, for example, I mean, he's been coaching for like 30 years. So even though he hasn't been a head coach before, he has a ton of experience.
Yeah, I think if you are experience is obviously huge. If you have bad experience, I think it all depends on how you explain it. Like, what are your you have to break it down exactly what you did that was wrong, your approach, what happened, how you try to fix it, what you do better this time. And the problem with one of the problems with Josh McDaniels was they kind of gloss over the whole of the Broncos debacle. They're kind of like, that's the Broncos, screw them. This is the Raiders. We're going to bring the Patriot stuff in. It's going to be great. And now we're looking at this guy was a disaster as a coach for the Broncos. You know, they examined why that went so wrong and what his reasons were. I know he talked about he's going to be more personable, but I mean, come on, let's you got to have to do better than that if you're going to explain to me why you were so bad at your first part, your first chance doing this job. So I think that's the key thing is explaining what happened, what went wrong, not only as far as the overall experience, but also your end of it, what you contributed that went wrong.
Yeah, I think the lesson we've learned is being a person that nobody likes and trying to become a person that everyone likes is a very hard thing to do. So maybe that kind of hurts Brian Flores' candidacy. But I mean, everyone probably likes him in Minnesota, so maybe he did change it. Maybe with Flores is more of just like he got a little too much of a power trip in Miami, which is what it sounds like based on Ryan Fitzpatrick's podcast.
Just in very general terms, there are a lot of coaches that I've met or talked to or heard about that are different personality-wise when they're the number 2 guy versus number 1 guy. And they kind of lose what brought them to that point. So maybe I don't know Brian that well, but I just think so. I think yeah, you got to be the same guy. I mean, you got to be the same guy you always have been, regardless of your job.
Yeah, I mean, also like every coach is different. Like just because one guy didn't grow doesn't mean another one can't. Like I know one of our Bills writers wrote about Sean McDermott today and how he was kind of an asshole when he first got to Buffalo, and now he's like in the meeting room singing Alicia Keys and everybody loves him and all that stuff. So I mean, guys, yeah, he was singing Alicia Keys and telling dad jokes and fuck, I forget which one it was, but it was one of her hits, man. It was like a 07 hit. It was a jam, man. I was like, wow. All right, Sean McDermott. Okay, man. So all that to say, guys can grow.
We're going from 9/11 jokes to Alicia Keys.
I mean, Brian Flores is aware of this. I mean, obviously, our guy Mike Silver did a big story for us a couple days ago about Grigson and Brian Flores and their images and trying to rehab them. So I think it's definitely something you're aware of and definitely something you have to deal with if you're going to be in the job cycle again.
All right, we're about to get out of here, but we got another tip and question from Julio Alman. The hiring of Jed Hughes to handle the interview process of GM and head coach is definitely a step in the right direction. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, can't hurt. I mean, what they were doing before clearly wasn't working. So yeah, he's I think he's like in the 70s, I think. So he's been around for a long time, has a lot of connections, and has done a few of these coaching searches before. This is a more common thing in the college ranks for places to use search firms than the NFL, I would say. But it's been done before, and it's worked out for different places. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's definitely better than Ken Herrock, what he was doing the last couple times, basically coordinating their searches. So yeah, Jed Hughes, why not?
Anybody's better than Ken Herrock. I mean, you get one of those Raider fans with the face paint's better than Ken Herrock. But did Jed Hughes have like a big guy? Is there a big guy? He got a job at some point?
I'd have to research it. I don't know, but I know he's been in the game for a while.
I know he's been in the game, but I need some big, some big trophies. I need some big names I can look at. Okay, that makes sense. But clearly, we talked about the process has been flawed. The Raiders do not know what they're doing. So you bring somebody else in who does. Maybe it's Jed. Maybe it's Tom Brady. But clearly, this has been a bad process for a long time. So, and Mark Davis is on top of that. He'll tell you like he's to blame for. I mean, it's on him. I mean, and it is. I mean, he's not wrong. So he's trying to fix it. I always give him credit for that. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he's trying to fix it.
Yeah, let's for now give Mark credit for not trying to do the same thing and expecting different results. He's trying something different, and we'll see if it works out. And we won't know until the results are the results.
Yeah, so if we're back here in 2026 doing this shit again, then we know they were wrong, and if not, then they did a good job.
Yeah.
So what's next? So after you like go to Tom Brady, who's like the arch enemy, the Tuck rule. What's next? What's the next? I mean, what's the next step? I don't even know what you do.
Sell another minority share to Peyton Manning. I don't know.
So I don't know. I'm just saying.
Okay. Charles Woodson, bring him in.
Oh, there you go. Charles
Get
Woodson.
a
All
roll.
right. Charles, you're in the bullpen. Get warmed up. So let's go.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I gotta. So
That should be good.
this is from a few years ago. I just read an article from when
There
the Chiefs and the Bucks played in the Super Bowl a few years ago. Corn Ferry placed both of those head coaches. It's Andy Reid and Bruce Arians. So there you go. There goes his reputation. So
Man.
those two hires worked out pretty well.
Oh, bring back. What's Bruce doing? Is Bruce still retired, playing golf, smoking cigars?
He's like doing some consulting shit.
Yeah, he's still working with the Buccaneers at some level.
Yeah, Andy Reid's winning Super Bowls. So there you go.
Bring in Bruce as an advisor. I like it.
There you go, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today in this emergency pod. I apologize for being late. Again, that's Neil's fault.
Man.
Oh, it's not. It's your fault.
Come on, dude.
I'm standing on business for Neil, man.
Hey, Neil, get on the mic, man. Blast this fool, Neil.
Yeah, man. We texted. We had like 8 messages saying, "Yo, 12. We got it locked in."
Yeah.
I just saw it at 3 p.m.
Well, you should have kept reading, man.
We had messages by
after
the Penn State loss, man. I was talking so much smack to my Notre Dame.
Get out of here. Get out of here, man.
Here's Neil.
Neil,
Neil, tell him off, Neil. Go ahead.
I'm not telling him off. I'm just not tolerating this disrespect, Ted. Come on, man.
Yeah, come on. You're tolerating Ted. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man. Tell him.
That's what I'm talking about. Come on, man. All right. That's a good
All right.
finish.
All right. How we can get out of here?
Talk to you guys later.
Peace.